Safari wagon. Legacy soft top. This is gonna suck. 96 by 50 are the dimensions. I don't know if we're gonna keep that ugly ass rear spoiler on this thing or not. But I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of grown on me. But I'm not sure if it's gonna fit. My original plan when I ordered this thing was to just remove that spoiler. But there's no fasteners. I don't know how they put that on there. I mean, it's glue of some sort, and it's good. All right, the first step is to assemble the frame, and this is just temporary, just so we can get a layout on the car itself. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Obviously, you're going to want to square this up. We'll loosen it and square each corner, but I just wanted to kind of show you what it looks like. I got some really bad news for me. I do have to take that spoiler off. It's gonna have to go back a little ways, and I'm already into that radius that they body fillered in. So while I was taking everything out of the inside, I did notice that there is a couple holes that they had poked for this, I believe. And it just has the stud down. I don't think they actually put a nut on it. So I guess it's kind of irrelevant, but I am gonna end up discovering some holes. Oh boy. Man, that thing's on. Honda's breaking that. That could have been a lot worse. I don't know what that is. So update on where I'm at, because everything I've been doing is boring, so I'm not gonna do anything with the video. I centered this thing up, looking on the inside and on the outside on where exactly this frame is going to go. Obviously the spoiler's off. And then I just used calipers, so I would just go to points, because it's really hard to measure because everything's kind of radiused. And I just went around it, and I just kept going around it until I had the thing right where I wanted it, so it's even front to back and side to side with calipers. And then I just marked the inside corners, and then I just made marks down the sides and I did it on the inside. And that's going to be my reference for where I'm going to lay out to cut it out. But now I'll take the frame off. I'm going to have to move those lines out, because inside isn't where you cut. You cut it to out here so that this drops down through. So I'll have to move those lines out. And then make sure everything's right, and we'll do our cut and drop this thing in there. So anyway, that's the plan there. So I'm going to take this thing off. I'm going to lay it all out, and then we'll look at it 8 million times, and then we'll cut a big hole. Okay, so I put tape around, and I lined the tape up with the marks that we made from the inside of the frame, and we need to cut on the outside of the frame. And so I just found tape that was the right width. So on the sides, it was really easy. It was 1.4. Let's see, what was that? About 1.420 on the sides, and then on the ends, it's 5/8, but all I had was 3/4 tape, but 3/4 tape is 720. So it's a little bit wide. So when I cut the front and the back, I'll cut in the tape because I have my tolerance basically built in. We want to leave the hole slightly larger than the frame. And then on the sides, I'm going to cut with the cutting wheel on the outside of the line. I'm using a 60 thousandths cutoff wheel. And then I'm going to do it on the outside so that we have a little bit of clearance. Because technically right now, it would fit in there if I cut it exactly on the tape, but it would be really, really tight. And we don't want it really tight. We want a little bit of play so that we can adjust it to make it as perfect as possible. So I'm going to just measure this thing up with some calipers, make sure that everything landed where I wanted it, and then we're going to start cutting. So I tried a couple different methods of cutting it out and just resorted back to a good old-fashioned grinder with a cutoff wheel. All right, there goes the structural integrity of the car. Should get it off of here without scratching the shit out of it. So I found that when you cut it, don't cut through the little cross members yet, because they're not actually attached to the other side very well. They're just like spot welded on there with a couple spot welds, so they bend off really easy, as you can see. So I just leave them, plus it holds this up while you're cutting it out. And then we can come back through and cut those out. Whee! Before I do anything to commit, we have to do some measurements, and you have to make sure these tracks are perfectly parallel the entire length, because otherwise you won't be able to slide the top back. It has guides that slide in there, and as straight as I think I got it, I actually didn't get it very straight. It's actually being pinched in the middle. So to cure our problem, I ran some string lines front to back. Made them really tight, and that way we can see where our top kind of bows in, or our cut bows in. And then I'll just trim it to the string line, and then we'll move on. I don't think I'm going to use much of my video because it's really stupid to watch and you don't really know what I'm doing. And I can explain to you really quick what I just did. So all I did, I have my width in both ends, the front and the back. And then I needed my width on the sides, and that's what I did with the string line. So and then I cut it. And then I just took my rails and I just sheet metal screwed them down. And I used I just tried to keep the screw real centered. Granted, I can, when I drill the hole out, I can oversize the hole on the car so that we can have some adjustment. But if I could put it down exactly where I wanted it, I'd know all the holes are centered. Now we take it back off. We drill out all our holes. We make sure that we can get to the bottom of every one, which, like this one, for example, is in there. I kind of want to leave these. I'm thinking I might tie this into the roof. The problem is that right now it has padding in between, so the roof isn't actually touching that. Some of them, the padding came out. So what I might do is put a steel spacer in there and then just tack the roof to it, and all of those. And then where I have to cut it out, like right here where there's supposed to be a nut right there, I'm gonna have to just cut this out in there, which won't be too hard to do, especially once this is gone. Okay, so there's a couple of these that once the rail is installed, you can't get to back here for the nuts. So what I did is I drilled all the way through with a little 3/16 drill, straight down and through. So now I'm gonna come up from the bottom side with this hole saw, and I'm going to drill holes that are just big enough for my nut driver to go through. So I'm going to do 3/4. That gives us plenty of space in case I wasn't perfectly straight or whatever. And now I just use the hole saw, being very careful not to punch through it real hard and make a bump in the roof or dent our roof. And now I'm tapping those things up with a hammer, and then I will come back through and weld them. And so instead of using a spacer, like I said originally, I just bent them up. They bend very easily. They're not attached to the side of the car very well. So I just did that, and then we'll tack them on there. It worked out pretty good. Okay, so now the painful task of grinding or chipping all that fiberglass off of there. Now I'm taking this pretty big piece of copper and I have to plug their holes that they had in there for the spoiler, but they didn't actually bolt it down, so I wish they hadn't have drilled holes. But it's okay, I got it cleaned up around all of them, so I'm just going to weld it up. So I'll use this piece of copper. Now, if you do this, copper removes heat very fast, but it'll pull it up this way, so it's going to get real hot on the handle a lot faster than steel will. So just be prepared for that. Okay, and the nice part about it, the copper does not, the weld won't stick to the copper, so I'll probably leave that in there and grind that off there real quick so it's stiff. 1 down, 6 to go. Okay guys, so there's my goofy mask job. I did do a little bit of body work on the back end, and I just used a DA sander, a DeWalt 20 volt DA sander to, you know, kind of smooth everything out and get rid of the rest of that fiberglass and stuff. And that actually worked really, really good. I was surprised. I made a little short of it. I'll put a tab up in the corner of the video for it. With this Raptor liner, so it doesn't really atomize in the air and get on stuff, but it does fly across the room and stick to stuff. So you always have to have shields. And then in my situation in here, this would be ideal to do this outside. But right now it's winter and I can't. So I put shields. This is just like a foil shield that I can spray when I'm spraying this direction. I'll spray it, you know, kind of into the jam this way, and this will catch it. And then I'll always just make sure that I'm pointing at a shield so that I can minimize how much stuff goes flinging across the shop. So we'll see what happens. I think this is gonna take 2 bottles of Raptor liner. So I'm gonna start getting ready, and then I'm going to spray this thing, and then we'll vacate the shop because it's gonna stink in here for a while. I like to spray the first coat on at about 30 psi and then get it real covered wet, so it's real wet, and that way you don't get any pinholes going through. You know, if it was bare metal, you would rust. And then I'll come back through and texture it with finer mist, which will be around 50-55 psi. That's how I spray it. But you can play with it and adjust for your liking. Ta-da! So that is it. I ended up taking 3 bottles, and I ended up running it when I applied the wet coat. I did it at lower pressure, around 30, and then when and that makes it really like spread out a lot, and it tends to get better coverage, because what I've found, if you always spray it at high pressure, sometimes it will rust down in the lows of the texture. Unless you put it on really, really thick or like multiple coats. So either way, I mean, however you get it down there, you get it down there, but just be forewarned. So I like to make it glossy on the first coat, so it's like really wet on there without running it. There's a pretty big variant there, so you can do it. And then come back when it's drier and do the misting coat, and that's what gives it that, you know, nicer, consistent texture. So I was pretty good. I didn't get any on myself except for when it squirted out the top because I squeezed the bottle. And then I got some on myself. But you can usually do this without getting it on yourself. If it's blowing back on you while you're doing it, you have too much pressure. You need to turn it down and change your technique up a little bit. But all right, so it's been around 4 hours, and that's about the happy medium in my current conditions. For removing that. So if you remove it too early, it'll be stringy when you go to pull on it. And if you remove it too late, it's really hard to get the tape off of the, it's really hard to get the tape to cut the rhino liner. If you can buy tape that has string line built in it, and you will pull the string first, and then you'll pull the tape out from under it. But the problem I have with that stuff and rhino liner, it works really good on wrap, is it leaves like a little bit of an edge that is underneath, that it makes the rhino liner so you can actually get your fingernail underneath it just on the very top. So I don't like it that way, but if you don't have the time to peel it 4 hours afterwards, then I think it is the better option. So I'm going to pull this one off so you can kind of see how it goes. So it's still, it's very dry, but it's not 100% dry yet. So I'm going to remove it so that I can pull this as carefully as possible. So what I like to do is pull it completely 180 degrees from the direction. So I have fine line tape on this one. And so I'm going to keep it always flat backwards on there, and it allows it to cut it really well. where if we just pull straight 90 degrees from that it could lift that. So there we go. So we got a pretty good line on that one. I'm liking the crispness of the lines. I put enough on there to where it's, you know, it's bulky and it's on there. It's not just like painted, kind of covering it up. So there will be times where you're pulling this off, and I want to show you this, where you do have to score the liner with a razor knife to get the tape off. The tape becomes kind of brittle because of it, because of the liner on it. So you'll have to score it, and that's when it's too dry. That'll happen. So there is a happy medium on between too wet and too dry. So it's not the end of the world, though. It's pretty easy. So what I'm doing here is I put on a foam weather stripping on the bottom of it. It's actually a really good weather stripping. I'm pretty happy with it. I'll put a link in the description below. It's 2 inches wide, so it was too wide, but it wasn't quite wide enough to do 2 strips with one piece of foam, so I had to use twice as much as I needed. So I had to put the foam on the rails themselves, front and back, the sides, and then also on my spacers. I have a general understanding of how this thing works, so I'm just going to start doing it. I may have to undo what I did. So hopefully all our holes still line up, which I don't see why they wouldn't, but you never know. That one lined up. That one lined up. Woohoo! We're off to a good start. Okay, so I snugged it down a little bit. I think the next step now is to put the top on the frames, on the 2 side frames, because once those frames are in, you can't get the top on or off. You have to take the rails off to get the top off, I believe. I'm fairly certain that's how it is. So let's go feed that top on there and see if we can't make a mess of it. So instead of putting the top on the rails off the car, I decided to put the rails on and just loosely attach them at the front. And then slide the top on from the back going forwards. And that actually worked out really well, holding it, especially because I was by myself. So that worked out really well. I definitely advise to do it that way. Okay, so I got these ones. I put all these ones in, and even that one. None of them are tight. I just got them all started. I didn't give myself any way of accessing these, so they're very difficult to get the nuts on, but they're on there now. Having a dental pick with the weather stripping that I chose to put on there makes it a lot easier, just to line everything up before you start trying to cram a screw through a blind. So now we should be able to put this thing on, and that should wind up the back. Oh, I also stuck in the aluminum spacer on the side while it's off. So I'm going to try to get this thing in there. Okay, so now I'm going to utilize the front guides as my width separator. So I'm going to just put the bolts in and snug them up as I pull this thing forward. Slowly but surely. What I am working on here is I ordered mine with an internal headliner. So on the back, they give you the rail, but you have to, once the top is installed and pulled tight, you have to actually screw that in and pull the fabric tight. And then screw it in and then cut the fabric off. So here it is, shut. And I am really, really happy. It makes me really excited to get this car done. Having this top done, I was kind of dreading doing this, and it ended up not being as bad as I was anticipating it being. And it worked out pretty good. So from right here, that is how you upholster it. So it actually comes with a trim piece. So you just go from the factory edge where the headliner went up to that aluminum rail. And then they have a bead lock thing that locks it on. So it should be fairly easy to upholster that. At least that's the theory. Kind of cool. I'm extremely happy with how this turned out. And I forgot to mention that Legacy nailed the radius on the top to match the radius of the roof. I measured it really carefully. I told them, and they made it exactly how I told them. So they totally nailed it. So I'm extremely happy with this thing, and I'm very motivated to get it done now. So there'll be a lot more to come on this here shortly. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again real soon.